Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accusing Hamas of backtracking on parts of the Gaza ceasefire deal announced yesterday, claiming the group is attempting to gain further concessions. And until the issue is resolved, Netanyahu says his cabinet will not meet to approve the agreement. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is following the latest for us from Tel Aviv and joins me now to discuss. So, Ramy, it's been hard for us to understand here in the United States what actually is the holdup. At one point, we've heard from everybody from members of the Biden administration to local media reports that the sticking point has more to do with politics and whether Prime Minister Netanyahu is able to sell this to his coalition in the Knesset. Now we're hearing it maybe has to do with Hamas. What are you hearing?
Yeah, well, first off, on the face of it, this news will be frustrating and disheartening for people on both sides of this conflict. Here in Israel, waiting for those hostages to finally come home, and also in Gaza for a cessation of the bombing over the past 466 days. Now, earlier today, we got first word, notifications that the cabinet approval had been delayed, and then we got a statement from the Prime Minister's office saying in a statement here that Hamas reneged on parts of the deal, the claim there to extort last-minute concessions. Now, the discussion here from Israeli media is that this may have to do with which Palestinian detainees may be released in exchange for Israeli hostages. The initial agreement apparently was that both sides had agreed that some people, some detainees, would be off limits, but now it's being reported that Hamas actually wants to have, in effect, a veto and a final say on which detainees would potentially come out. My read on this is that they may be wanting potentially higher value targets, higher value detainees, past activists, past leaders of Hamas, who could also be potential future leaders to take over for all those who have already been killed.
It's such a head scratcher because presumably this would have been raised during those meetings in Qatar, and you had both the United States, the Qataris and the Israelis all there trying to hammer out this deal. You would expect that Hamas would say, these are the people that we want released from these Israeli prisons. So if they're not able to get over this hurdle, Ramy, then what happens?
Well, right now, the read is that on both sides, they're saying that they are committed to this. Hamas did come out with a statement a couple hours ago saying that they are committed to this. One local Israeli news station also said that they believe that this is going to be resolved. If that happens, then it would go to the Security Cabinet, made up of 5 ministers. It would then go to wider and wider circles of approval. It would go to the full cabinet, made of 10 ministers. Then it would go to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, with 120 people. If that happens, and depending on how this pause in the talks has impacted the future timeline, we may still see the first hostages come out of Gaza this Sunday. Not quite sure how this is impacted, but so far we haven't heard any change on that timeline. Off of that, then phase 1 would start, and we would see the exchange, the release of Palestinian prisoners. Also, we'd see the Israeli military then pull back from population centers in the center part of Gaza to the perimeters. But again, this hasn't been signed. It's been announced, but it still has not been signed, so we're still waiting for that.
All right, Ramy Inocencio, the whole world also awaiting to hear what we all hope is good news, which is a cessation of hostilities and those hostages coming home. Ramy Inocencio doing some excellent reporting on the ground for us in Tel Aviv. We appreciate you, brother. Thank you. I want to bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman for more. So, Willie, you heard the conversation that I just had with Ramy. You presumably heard the conversation that we had with a person from the State Department this morning on CBS Mornings, who essentially said that they believe that this deal is happening. The Biden administration has been working on this for months. The president suggesting yesterday that he had been working and proposing a deal like this way back in May. So the key issue that seems to be also being discussed now is the role that the Trump team played in all of this. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, that's right, Vlad. Part of the reason why you're seeing this deal come about, and President Biden talking about how both his team and the incoming Trump team work together is because they want to make sure that they present a united front, that Hamas doesn't exploit any differences between the Biden team and the Trump team. In fact, President Biden, after that meeting, that Oval Office meeting with then President-elect Trump, following the results of the 2024 election, directed his team to work with President-elect Trump's team to make sure that they're on the same page. In fact, his envoy, the envoy that I should mention that the president-elect has appointed to that position, Steve Witkoff, went to the Middle East, traveled to the Middle East to meet with leaders, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, to bring President Trump's thoughts to the table with all of this. So both presidents taking some credit here. But I will point out that the White House has been on the same page, the same footing, because in large part, this deal will have to be carried out by the president-elect's team instead of the Biden team, because really the weeks and months that will come, we'll have to wait and see what happens with this deal and how it all plays out.
Yeah, indeed. The president, as you know, delivered that final address to the nation. So for all intents and purposes, whatever happens, which is supposed to take place on Sunday, will be part of the Trump administration. But going back to that speech from last night, Willie James, what did the president have to say about wealth inequality in the United States?
Yeah, it was certainly an interesting speech, to say the least, because President Biden didn't necessarily spend all of his time talking about his legacy. He talked about how there's a threat of an oligarchy, some tech billionaires controlling American society. Listen to what he had to say last night.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous concentration, and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms.
Now, the president didn't name names, but it's not hard to figure out who he's talking about here. Perhaps Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, two men who really have grown closer to Trump, especially Elon Musk, since he controls X, and Mark Zuckerberg, of course, controls Meta, Facebook, and Instagram. But it's clear that President Biden wanted to give this warning of sorts to the American people to make sure that they stand guard, essentially, using his words in that speech, his final farewell address from the Oval Office last night to the American people. He did, of course, touch on some of the things that he believes were major accomplishments during his 4 years in office. But, Vlad, this was the more interesting part of his speech. About 9 minutes or so into it, he started to go into this threat against American society, but also talking about how social media and the lack of fact-checking, which has been a major shift and change with some of these social media platforms, how Americans should be wary of misinformation and disinformation, Vlad.
All right, Willie James Inman for us at the White House. Thank you, Willie James.